I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm just here to get through the day. That was the only thought running through my mind as I sat in the corner of a quiet cafe in Brooklyn. The world outside was busy, bustling with energy, but inside the cafe, everything was calm, almost a calm. The sound of soft acoustic music mingled with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon. It should have been relaxing, but I felt none of that. Instead, I stared at my phone screen, letting the endless stream of messages from my family pour in. Grandma's turning 75. You better not come alone this year. Mum already picked someone for you to meet. She's super polished, a Stanford MBA. You'll love her. Zach, seriously, bring a date or else. I let out a slow breath, running my hand over my face in frustration. The messages had been relentless for the last few days. My family had made it clear being the successful CEO of Harrison Enterprises wasn't enough. I needed to prove to them that I had a life outside of work. That I wasn't just a workaholic who had built a multi-million-dollar empire and let everything else fall to the wayside. They wanted a perfect picture, my family, and the perfect woman by my side. They wanted someone who would fit into their idea of what success looked like. Someone who could stand beside me at events and dinners. But there was a problem with their plan. I didn't have anyone, not because I didn't try, but because nothing ever felt real. Dating had always seemed like another transaction, something to check off the list, but never something that truly made sense in my life. I leaned back in my chair, glancing around the cafe, trying to distract myself. A couple of customers were talking quietly at the counter, but otherwise, the place was practically empty. As I sat there, a part of me felt like I was suffocating. How had I let my family's expectations dictate so much of my life? My phone buzzed again. Come on, Zach. Grandma really wants to see you with someone. It's important. Don't embarrass us again. I rubbed my temples, resisting the urge to reply. I knew what my mum would say if I didn't comply, something about disappointing Grandma, about letting the family down. But deep down, I wasn't sure if any of it really mattered. Was it worth it? Did I even care about fitting into the family's picture of perfect? It was then that the door to the cafe chimed, and a small gust of wind swept inside, carrying the cool edge of early spring. My eyes instinctively lifted from my phone, and that's when I saw her. She wasn't like the women I usually noticed. She didn't stand out with flashy clothes or perfectly styled hair. She was simple blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing a casual apron smudged from the morning rush. But the way she moved so naturally, so effortlessly, made me stop. She was guiding an elderly woman inside, helping her step carefully through the door, making sure she was comfortable as she walked toward a table near the window. There was something about the way she interacted with the woman, a kind of softness, of calm that I hadn't seen in a long time. As she settled the woman into her chair, she smiled at her, offering her a cup of chamomile tea with both hands. It wasn't the kind of smile someone gives to a customer. It was sincere, real, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something stir inside me. I wasn't used to seeing kindness like that, not in my world. My world was full of suits, business deals, and calculated moves. But her kindness, her genuine attention, was disarming. She glanced up briefly, her eyes meeting mine for a split second. I quickly looked away, but the idea had already begun to form in my mind. It was irrational, unexpected, but there was no stopping it. I had come to the cafe to escape my family's pressure. But instead, I found myself standing up, walking across the room. I had no plan, no clear reason for doing it other than this strange, unexpected pull. When I reached a counter, I paused for a moment, unsure of how to even start the conversation. She was still behind the counter, entering an order into the register. I stood there for a moment, watching her, unsure of myself. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm, inviting, as if she could sense I was lost in thought. I didn't even hesitate. I reached into my wallet and pulled out 5 crisp $100 bills, placing them on the counter between us. Her eyes flicked down to the money, then back to me, clearly confused. "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "For one day. Tomorrow is my grandmother's birthday. I'll pick you up, introduce you to my family, and then take you home. That's it. No strings attached." She blinked twice, her eyes wide with confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" I let out a breath, trying to explain. "I'll pay you $500 for one night. Just a dinner, that's all. No cameras, no jokes. Just someone to stand beside me and smile for a few hours. My family wants me to bring a date. They think I'm incomplete without one." Her gaze shifted from the money to me, then back again. "Is this a joke?" "No," I replied firmly, "no joke. I just need someone who can help me avoid the awkward questions. Someone who can fill a role for one evening. That's all." She crossed her arms, still eyeing me carefully, as if trying to figure out whether I was serious. "And what makes you think I'd say yes?" I met her gaze, refusing to back down. "Because you just helped a stranger like she was your own family. And because you smiled like you meant it." There was a moment of silence, the kind that made everything feel suspended in time. Then, to my surprise, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said, "but only for the evening. And you have to call me Sophie, not some fake name." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Deal." She reached for the money, but I held it back just a little. "Not before," I said softly. "After." She nodded, and just like that, we had entered into an arrangement neither of us had prepared for. A simple deal. A fake relationship. But something in the back of my mind told me this wouldn't be as simple as I thought. I left the cafe, my thoughts spinning. I had made a decision, one I hadn't expected to make. But as I walked out into the evening air, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just paying her to play a role for one night. There was something about Sophie, her sincerity, her warmth, that I couldn't ignore. I had asked her to pretend to be my girlfriend for a day, but I was starting to wonder if this little arrangement would change me more than I ever imagined. And I wasn't sure whether that terrified me or intrigued me. The night felt surreal. I had hired Sophie for one simple reason: to play the role of my girlfriend for a single evening. A pretense. Nothing more. But as I watched her interact with my family, as she stood beside me, not acting out some scripted part, but simply being herself, something inside me shifted at first. I thought I could just get through the dinner, then drop her off at her place, and that would be the end of it. But Sophie wasn't like the other women I had brought around. There was no effort to impress anyone, no pretense, no artifice. She was calm, confident, and warm in a way that was completely disarming. It was like she wasn't just pretending to fit into a role. She was naturally fitting into a place she didn't even realize was waiting for her. Throughout the evening, Sophie moved through the dinner with ease. She engaged with my grandmother, my mother, my cousins, asking the right questions, laughing at the right moments. I could see my grandmother, usually the most critical of my choices, softening as she spoke with Sophie. The evening that had started out as a mere transaction, one date, no strings attached, had begun to feel ... real. I couldn't put my finger on it. Was it because Sophie was so unlike anyone I'd ever been around? Or was it something about her energy, how she managed to make even the most uncomfortable of situations feel natural? After dessert, we stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cool, and the lights from the city twinkled in the distance. My mind raced. I had been prepared for a one-night deal, a simple arrangement that would get me out of a difficult family situation. But now I wasn't so sure. I turned to Sophie, standing beside me, her gaze turned toward the horizon. She had no idea, but she had made this night easier for me in ways I didn't anticipate. I have to admit, I said, breaking the silence, my voice quieter than usual. You've been better than I expected. Sophie turned to face me, the same calm expression in her eyes, but I could see a flicker of curiosity. How so? You're just natural, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. I didn't expect you to fit in so easily, you know. You're not like the women my family usually expects me to bring. She smiled, but it wasn't a forced smile. It wasn't the smile of someone trying to make a good impression. It was the smile of someone who was just being themselves. I'm not sure whether I should take that as a compliment or an insult, she teased, her voice light but warm. I couldn't help but laugh. Her humor was another thing that put me at ease. The whole night had been full of small, quiet moments that felt real. She wasn't trying to fit a mold, to be the perfect woman my family thought I should have. Take it as a compliment, I said, my tone sincere. We stood there for a moment, watching the night unfold before us. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I had hired Sophie for a simple task, but something about her made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I had spent my entire adult life running my company, my time consumed by quarterly reports and business decisions. Love, relationships, those were things I pushed aside. Dating had always seemed like another transactions, something to check off the list, but never something that truly made sense in my life. But Sophie, she was different. Her presence, her kindness, her authenticity, ... It made me feel things I had long buried, and I wasn't sure what to do with that. Thanks, I said, breaking the quiet. You've made this easier than I expected. She turned to look at me, her gaze steady. It's my pleasure, she said simply, her voice warm. It wasn't a big deal. I'm glad I could help. As the evening came to a close, I walked Sophie to the car, the weight of the night's interactions still hanging in the air. My mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of the strange shift I felt. She wasn't just the woman I had hired to play a role. She wasn't just some stranger I had paid to pretend to be my girlfriend. There was something more there, something deeper. I didn't know what this was. I didn't know if it was just the intimacy of the night, or if there was something real starting to form between us. But I didn't want to question it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't want to overanalyze. I just wanted to let it be. As Sophie stepped into the car, she looked back at me with that same quiet, composed smile. I'll text you when I get home, she said. I nodded, even though I knew she didn't have to. It was strange, but I wanted her to. For some reason, I didn't want this night to end with just a simple goodbye. I wasn't sure why. but the thought of never seeing her again didn't sit right with me. "Take care, Sophie," I said, my voice softer than usual. She smiled one last time before the door closed behind her, and the car drove away, leaving me standing there, watching the tail lights disappear into the distance. I stood there for a long moment, processing everything that had just happened. I had set out with one goal: to appease my family, to pretend for a night. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I wasn't pretending anymore. Not with Sophie. I wasn't sure what this was, what would come of it, or if I was ready to let someone in again. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel so alone. I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. As I walked back inside my house, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, Sophie had shown me a side of myself I'd forgotten. And I didn't know if that was a good or bad thing yet. But I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next few days passed by in a blur of meetings and reports, but every time I glanced at the clock, my thoughts drifted back to the dinner. To Sophie, it had been a simple arrangement, one that I thought would be nothing more than a way to get my family off my back for a few hours. But as the days stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the evening had been anything but simple. There was something about Sophie, something in the way she moved through the evening with such ease, how she didn't try to impress anyone, yet somehow managed to win everyone over without even trying. It wasn't just her appearance, though she was beautiful in her own way. It wasn't just the way she spoke or the stories she shared. It was the calmness she radiated, the sincerity in her actions. In the hours after she left the estate, I found myself rethinking everything I thought I knew. How had I gotten so lost in my work that I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in my life who wasn't just there because they had to be? The whole evening felt more real than anything I had experienced in the last few years. I hadn't expected any of it. I hadn't expected to enjoy the evening, let alone feel this strange connection to someone I had hired. I had been so consumed by the idea of being the perfect CEO, the perfect son, the perfect everything, that I had forgotten what it was like to just be me. I tried to keep my focus on work. I really did. But every time I looked at the clock, I found myself thinking about Sophie. It had been days since the dinner, but I couldn't stop replaying her smile in my mind. The way she had spoken so naturally, the way she had made everyone in the room feel at ease, even my grandmother, who was usually impossible to impress. It wasn't like I was used to dating. I hadn't been in a serious relationship in years. My world had always been consumed by numbers, meetings, and deals. Relationships felt like a distraction, but Sophie, she wasn't a distraction. She made me feel something I hadn't realized I had been missing. The next day, I found myself at the cafe again. I hadn't meant to go back, but somehow my feet had led me there. As soon as I stepped inside, I spotted Sophie behind the counter, moving through the routine of preparing orders. She didn't see me at first, and I took a moment to watch her, to take in the way she worked, calm, collected, and effortlessly graceful. When she finally noticed me standing there, her eyes lit up, a small but warm smile curling on her lips. "Zachary," she greeted, wiping her hands on the apron before walking over. "Back again." "I guess so," I said, suddenly feeling awkward, unsure of what I was doing here. "I just wanted to check in. I meant what I said last time. Thanks for making that evening so easy." She shrugged, as though it had been no big deal. "It was fun. I told you I'd make it through without any trouble." I smiled, though I couldn't help but notice how she downplayed it. Sophie wasn't just making it through the evening. She had transformed the experience. She made it feel real, something I hadn't expected. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wanted to see her again outside of this strange, temporary arrangement we'd created. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. Actually, there's something else I wanted to ask. Her eyebrows raised, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. What's that? Would you, I paused, trying to figure out how to phrase it. Would you go out with me? Not as a date for my family, just you and me. A real date. The words sounded almost foreign to me, but I couldn't take them back once they were out. I saw Sophie blink in surprise before she processed what I had said. I wasn't expecting that. She said, though there was a hint of a smile tugging at her lips, but sure, I'd like that when... I felt a weight lift from my chest at her answer, though I couldn't tell if it was relief or something else. How about tomorrow night? I said, suddenly feeling more confident in the moment. She nodded. Tomorrow sounds good. As I turned to leave the cafe, my mind was already racing. This wasn't just about fulfilling some family expectation anymore. This was about me getting to know Sophie, about breaking through the walls I had spent so many years building. Maybe it wasn't so much about what my family wanted. Maybe it was about what I wanted. The next evening, I found myself waiting outside her apartment building at exactly 7 p.m. I wasn't nervous, at least. That's what I kept telling myself. But as I leaned against my car, waiting for her to come down, I realized just how much I did care about how this night would go. She appeared at the entrance just as the sky turned a deep shade of blue. She wore a simple black dress that was understated but flattering, her hair down in soft waves that framed her face. She looked ... effortless, and, somehow, that made her even more beautiful. You look amazing, I said, my voice sincere. She smiled at me, a soft laugh escaping her lips. Thanks, you don't look too bad yourself. I opened the car door for her, my chest tightening as she slid into the seat. I couldn't help but notice the way she settled in so easily, like she had always belonged there. It was strange, but in the best way. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't playing a role. I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was just Zachary, and she was just Sophie. The drive to the restaurant was smooth, but it felt like time slowed down, stretching each moment as I stole glances at her. It wasn't just the way she looked that caught my attention. It was the way she made everything feel simpler. The way she was, so unpretentious, so real, was something I hadn't expected. Dinner passed in the same quiet ease. We talked about our lives, about her job, about the little things we enjoyed. I found myself opening up more than I usually did, telling her about the things I kept hidden from most people. My fears, my frustrations, my family. She listened without judgment, her eyes always fixed on me, as if I were the only person in the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not for my title or my wealth or my accomplishments, but for who I really was. And I could see that Sophie wasn't interested in any of that. She was just here with me because she wanted to be. When dinner ended, we stepped out into the crisp evening air, and I realized I didn't want the night to end. I didn't want to drop her off and say goodbye. I wanted to spend more time with her, to keep talking, to see where this would go. As we stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, I turned to her, the question I had been avoiding finally slipping from my lips. Would you like to do this again? I asked, unsure of how she would respond. She looked up at me, her eyes soft, her smile gentle. I'd like that very much. And just like that, I realized I wasn't just pretending anymore. The days after our first real date passed by in a blur, yet each one felt sharper, more defined, like a film reel I could no longer ignore. Sophie and I continued to see each other. Little things at first, a coffee on the weekend, a walk through the park, catching a movie at the small theater in town. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how little I actually knew about her, and how much more there was beneath the surface. It was easy to forget that this started as a one-night deal. Each time we were together, it felt ... natural, uncomplicated. I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about the whole idea of relationships. The kind of relationships I had been used to, the transactional ones, where everything had a clear purpose or agenda, had never felt like this. Sophie didn't want anything from me. She wasn't interested in my money or my position. She didn't even care about my family's expectations. It was strange. She just liked being with me, and I was beginning to like being with her more than I cared to admit. It was a Thursday evening when things really started to shift. I had spent the day buried in back-to-back meetings, my mind consumed with the next business deal, when my phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "Sophie, are you free tonight?" I was thinking we could grab dinner somewhere casual. No fancy suits, just us. I smiled at the message. The casual tone felt like a relief, like an invitation to step away from the world I was constantly tied to, the one that had defined who I was for so long, the one I was now so tired of pretending to live in. I quickly typed a response, trying to sound cool, but I knew I was already looking forward to it. "Zachary, sounds perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophie, 7 it is. See you then." I left the office earlier than usual, a rare thing for me. The drive to her apartment was short, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was rushing through life. I was simply ... waiting. Waiting to see Sophie ... when she opened the door that evening. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. The sight of her, dressed simply in jeans and a white blouse. No pretension, no designer labels, just herself, took me by surprise. She looked ... natural, beautiful in a way that was almost disarming. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than I expected, as I stepped inside. "Hey," she replied, her smile easy, unassuming. "Ready to escape the world for a while?" "More than ready," I answered. We didn't need grand plans. We walked around the neighborhood, found a small family-owned pizza joint, and ate under the dim light of a street lamp. There were no expectations, no fancy conversation, just two people enjoying a simple moment. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't CEO Zachary Hill in that moment. I was just ... Zach. The night was easy, almost effortless. We talked about everything and nothing at all, childhood memories, our favorite movies, the kind of music we liked. I found myself laughing more than I had in years. A genuine laugh that came from the gut, not the forced politeness I used to rely on. And she did the same. She laughed freely, without any of the hesitancy I had come to expect in people. As we walked back to her apartment, I realized how much I had been missing this real, unfiltered moments of connection. Not forced smiles or staged performances, just ... being. We reached the door to her building, and as I stood there, I felt a hesitation in the air. It wasn't awkward, just a shift. A moment where we both seemed to realize that this wasn't just a casual hangout anymore. There was something deeper happening between us. Something neither of us had planned, but that was undeniably there. "Sophie," I started, my voice quieter than usual. "I didn't expect this. Any of this." She turned to face me, her expression open, understanding. "Neither did I, to be honest," she said softly, her eyes searching mine. "But here we are." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Everything I had built my life around seemed insignificant compared to the feeling I had standing there with her. I don't know, I murmured, struggling to find the right words. "I've never been good at this." She smiled, her hand gently touching mine. "You're doing fine." For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe her. The next few days blurred together as Sophie and I continued to spend time with each other, our connection growing stronger. But even as we grew closer, I couldn't ignore the fact that my family's expectations still loomed over me. They had already made it clear that they weren't happy with the situation, specifically with Sophie. They were used to me dating women who were polished, refined, who fit the mold of what they thought I should be with. Sophie didn't fit that mold, and I could see the judgment in their eyes whenever she was around. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how little I cared about what they thought. Sophie had become more than just a date for the evening. She was someone I could talk to, someone who made me feel like I could breathe without all the weight of the world on my shoulders. One evening, after dinner at my place, as she was getting ready to leave, I stopped her at the door. I didn't know what I was asking for, but I knew I needed to say something. "Sophie," I began, my voice tight. "I don't want this to be a game. I don't want to pretend anymore." She turned to me, a soft smile playing at her lips. "Then stop pretending," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of her words settled over me. "Okay," I said finally. "No more pretending." The following week, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in this charade, pretending to be someone I wasn't just to satisfy other people's expectations. Sophie had shown me what it meant to be real, to be present, and I wasn't going to let her slip away. I wasn't sure what the future held, or how things would work out with my family. But I knew one thing for sure. I wanted Sophie in my life, not as a temporary solution, not as someone to impress my family with, but because she had become someone I genuinely cared about. Someone who made me feel like I was more than just a title, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to take a step towards something real. Asterisk. The days after our conversation felt like a quiet storm, a slow build-up of emotion I hadn't been prepared for. I kept thinking about the moments Sophie had said, "Stop pretending." It echoed in my mind, louder and louder, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. There was no turning back now. I had to decide what I truly wanted, not just for myself, but for the life I was building with Sophie. I spent the next few days avoiding the phone calls from my mother. I wasn't ready to explain myself to her, not yet, not when I wasn't even sure what I was doing. My family had always expected me to follow their blueprint, be the perfect son, bring home the perfect woman, and continue their legacy with the same sense of control and perfection I had used to build my company. But now, with Sophie in my life, everything felt uncertain, chaotic even, in the most refreshing way. Sophie was a contradiction to everything I had been taught about success. She wasn't polished or refined, not in the way my family would have liked. But she had something far more valuable: the way she spoke, the way she cared for others, and the way she made me feel seen for the first time in years made me want to be a better person. I couldn't let that slip away. I called Sophie later that evening. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, and her voice, calm as always, made my nerves settle just a little. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to sound casual, though the words felt heavy in my chest. "I was thinking, maybe we could spend the weekend together. No dinner parties, no pretending, just you and me. I want to get to know you better. All of you." There was a pause on the other end. I waited, holding my breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I expected. "Are you sure? I mean, we're just getting started, right?" I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah, but I don't want to waste time anymore. I know it sounds crazy, but I think I'm ready for something real. With you." She was quiet for a moment, and when she finally spoke again, her words were filled with warmth. "I'm glad to hear that, Zachary. I really am. But let's take it one step at a time. Let's just enjoy this, enjoy us, without the pressure." I smiled, relief flooding through me. "That sounds perfect. Just us. No pretenses." We made plans for the weekend, a quiet cabin by a lake, far from the eyes of my family, far from the expectations that had ruled my life for so long. We would simply be two people, figuring things out as we went along. The weekend came faster than I expected. The drive to the cabin was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Sophie and I had been spending a lot of time together, and the more time I spent with her, the more I found myself wanting to know her in ways I hadn't allowed myself to know anyone in years. It wasn't about her fitting some mold or meeting some standard. It was about her, the real, unfiltered, imperfect woman who had slowly come to matter more than I ever expected. We arrived at the cabin, nestled in the middle of the forest, far enough away from the noise of the city to feel like we were the only two people in the world. The moment we stepped out of the car, the fresh, pine-scented air filled my lungs. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm. I didn't have to be CEO Zachary Hill here. I didn't have to worry about appearances or business deals or anything at all. It was just me and Sophie that night. We cooked dinner together in the small kitchen of the cabin, the fire crackling in the background. We talked about everything and nothing: our favorite foods, the places we wanted to travel, the things we wanted to change about ourselves. It felt like I had known her for years, and yet it had only been a few weeks. She was so easy to talk to, so easy to be around, like I had known her my whole life. Later, we sat outside by the fire pit, the stars above us more vibrant than I had ever seen. I could feel her presence beside me, comforting, steady, and I realized how much I wanted to keep this feeling, to hold on to it, to build something real with her. "I don't think I've ever felt like this before," I said, my voice quiet in the still night air. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be perfect, trying to meet everyone's expectations, but with you, I don't feel that pressure. I feel like I can finally breathe." She turned to me, her face soft in the firelight. "You don't have to be perfect with me, Zachary. I don't need that. I just need you to be you." And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe her. Sophie wasn't asking for me to change. She wasn't asking me to be anything other than who I already was. In that moment, I realized how much I had been holding on to for far too long: the walls, the expectations, the idea of who I was supposed to be. and for the first time, I let it all go. That night, as we sat in silence, watching the fire burn low, I felt something shift. The weight of my responsibilities, the endless pressure of being perfect, seemed to dissolve. I didn't need to be anyone else. I just needed to be with Sophie. No pretenses, no expectations, just the two of us. We didn't talk about the future that night, but it didn't matter. I knew, deep down, that I had found something real. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it.